Hello everyone, today's episode is making a mold. Last time we did the face cast and in between plaster mold and silicone I put the Vaseline so it slides it in easily. Then on the nose hole I put the clean clay. Try not to change the shape too much. Then I will need a plaster, so I use a mask and tiny bit of water. It's a Ultracal 30. You can even use Hydrocal. Hydrocal sets up faster than Ultracal. When you put Ultracal, try to make it evenly and do not dump it. Slowly put it on. And if you see the surface, it will look like a dry lake. And mix with the hand. Make sure there's no chunks. Then I use a chip brush to paint it on. Very thin layer. Keep brushing on everywhere. And add more layer. So before put it on plaster, please make sure to put Vaseline on the plaster bandage in the back. Otherwise this plaster and the plaster bandage will stick and you cannot open. And I noticed that below the lip line it kept dropping down. I put the clean clay to make a wall so it doesn't waste the material. Make sure it's everywhere and tap the board so the bubble comes out. And I put the plastic back gently over. By the way, this is about how to throw away the leftover. You don't throw into the sink because it's gonna clog. The pipe you throw into the trash can later. Now, after 2 hours, the plaster is set up. The reason why I put the plastic bag over is to make the Ultracal stronger. Now positive mold on my face is out and I'm using the rasp to sand the sharp edges. You can use the Hydrocal, but Ultracal is stronger. And I'm using the dental tool, sculpting tool, to get rid of the imperfections. Make sure not to hurt your fingers because right now it's very sharp. It might cut your finger. Around the lips. And I noticed that some of my facial hair came out from the Lifecast, so I'm using the torch to burn it. Make sure not to burn yourself. Then I put this one in the project board. Then I use wet clay. It's a water-based clay. Cut it to make a thin layer. I place it under the positive mold. Then cut the side. Then I add more clay to make it smoother. Fill all the gaps. Make sure there's no gap between the plaster mold and this clay. Also, I'm adding in between the lips so there's no gap. This mold making process is called flared out. It's like flare pants that on the bottom is flared out, and I'm using the sponge and wet sponge to make it even smoother. If it's not flared out, it will create many undercuts of the mold and it will be harder to open the mold later. So make sure it is flared out. Now I am going to use crystal clear and dyeing spray. You will need 2 layers of crystal clear. Each layer has to be dried. Then I put dyeing spray, 1 layer, then let it dry. Now I am going to case the flared out mold with body double silicone again. I am going to use body double fast. This one sets out within 5 minutes. The ratio is 50-50. If you are not confident with the fast kick, you can use regular kick. It will take 10 minutes to 20 minutes. And I dump into the bowl. For this process, please do not use latex gloves. I am using the nitrile glove. If you use latex gloves, the silicone will not set up. Now I'm using my finger to put it on the plaster area, and also I'm using the chip brush so I get all the details. When you go around the clay area, you want to use the brush, not with the finger. You might change the shape by accident. And I'm using the air to pop the bubbles and also get all the details well. And I'm using the stick to smooth it out. I'm going to do this process 2 times. So the first layer, make sure to get all the details. You don't need to beef it up. And if you see any thin spots, you add more gently. this point, the silicone is getting chunky, so you don't want to move it too much. Now, second layer. I'm just dumping over the first layer. At this moment, I'm just using the wooden stick. Just make sure all the areas are evenly covered. Then, once it's cured, I'm using the blade, exact knife, to make the little bit angle on the bottom. This will be the key that the plaster shell over this will bite into it. Make sure not to cut it in too much. If you do that, it's going to destroy the mold inside. You see the key going in. Then I'm using the plaster bandage. Dip into the water. And I make the string and use the plaster, just push it into the key on the bottom. This will bite into the mold. And make sure pop all the bubbles. Next one is to put it on top and making sure it's smooth. There's no bubbles in between the plaster and the silicone mold. And I'm adding more layers. Each layer has double the layer, so right now I got 4 layers in total. And now I put more around the nose area. This will make the top flat. This will make this mold to be more stable. After the plaster is set up completely, I use a scraper. Gently make it upside down. And I'm using the wooden stick to take all the wet clay. Please do not use a metal stick. It will destroy the master mold. Then gently remove the silicone from the Ultracal mold and make sure all the silicone is going back to the plaster mold. Now I'm using water spray and brush it to clean all the residue out. Make sure not to use metal piece at this moment. I'm using a paper towel. So I have water and plaster into it. It is Ultracal 30. I'm putting it in gently. I'm using the left hand to go little by little. Once you see the dried lake surface looking, mix it. Mix it evenly. Make sure there's no chunks. And tap the cup to get the bubbles out. I'm using the chip brush. First layer of the Ultracal, you don't want to put a lot. Make sure all the layers are covered and there's no bubbles. I forgot to put the Vaseline on the plaster area. If you don't put that, it will not come out from the master mold. And I'm using my mouse to blow the air to get all the details. And I'm adding more Ultracal. And making sure there's no silicone showing on the surface. And cleaning the outside. And I will let this first surface dry, probably 10 to 15 minutes. It depends on the temperature. When you tap with the stick and if you feel it's not coming out from the surface, that's the time. As long as you don't wait for 2 hours, it should be okay. Next layer, I'm just splashing the plaster instead of touching with the brush yet. All the areas are covered. Make sure the brush is wet with the plaster and gently add more. With the brush, if you touch the first coat, it will destroy the surface, so make sure all the touches will be gentle. While we are waiting for the second layer to dry, I want to show you the old mold I have. It is from 1994. It is almost 30 years. Still I use it. This one is eyebrow cover mold. I used to make foam latex eyebrow cover from this mold. This one is December 1993. Now I am going to do the third layer, making sure the second layer is dried. Then I cut some burlaps into the small pieces. Once Ultracal mixed, I splash the Ultracal into the mold like I did for the second layer. Then dip one layer of burlap, place into the mold and gently tap with the chip brush. Make sure there's no air bubbles in between. And adding more to cover all the surface. Side also, left and right, top and bottom. When you do the corner, make sure not to exceed the silicone line. I'm adding more. This layer, I'm making it to the double layer. Another double layer on the top, making sure the outside is clean. Probably at this moment I have 4 or 5 layers. After that, I dump the residue. I noticed that I didn't have enough Ultracal. I'm mixing more. This layer I'm making it thicker a little bit. It's like concrete. And at this moment, I need to clean the Ultracal residue from the plaster shell. Otherwise, it will not come off. Then I put plastic back over to make this mold stronger. Wait for 2 hours. And the mold is very hard and it's sweating from the mold. Gently move the silicone from the mold. Once you see the gap, I use the wooden stick in between to lift it up. Sometimes it comes out easily. This one doesn't come out easily. So I'm using 2 tongue depressor, and in between I use a screwdriver and pop. The mold is very sharp, so be careful not to cut your finger. I'm going to use a rasp to sand off the sharp edge. In the next video, I'm going to explain how to make prosthetic sculpture. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.